G'day and welcome back to another episode of Practical Powerlifting. Today we are talking about helping people make good decisions in training and the coach's role around that. Coaching is about helping people make good decisions, and this is something that I've come to realize over the last few years and something that has been a center point of a lot of my coaching practice. Coaching is about a lot of things, actually. It can mean many different things to different people at different times. As a coach, we're there to help people get to where they want to go. And sometimes where they want to go is clear. I want to qualify for nationals. I want to hit this number. Sometimes it can be incredibly vague, especially when someone's new. They might not even really know where they're going or where they want to go or why they're even starting a strength training journey in the first place, just because they want to get a little bit stronger and put on a bit of muscle. But ultimately, as a coach, we can't do the things necessary to get someone where they want to go. I can't eat the food. I can't lift the weights. I can't get to the gym for them. I can't push for another rep for them. That responsibility falls squarely on the client. I've got a friend who's worked in schools, not as a teacher, but as a fitness instructor in those schools, like running kind of like strength and conditioning specific stuff for the schools. And he would tell me how challenging it is because many of the students just do not give a fuck. They don't want to be there. And he's conveyed to me, well, that's not his responsibility to make those unwilling students do the fitness program. If they don't want to be there, well, then why is he going to waste all this time on them? And I can understand that, in that setting. When you have, 30 students in a class 1 hour a week and you've got limited time and resources, then, there are so many competing priorities that focusing on the few that don't even want to be there, it's just not a priority, I suppose. But in a professional setting, between a paying client and a coach, this just can't be the standard. And unfortunately, it often is. I've literally heard coaches say things like, well, if my client won't do what's necessary, well, that's their problem. Or if they're not willing to put in the work, well, it's not my responsibility. Like, I beg your pardon, that literally is your problem. That is exactly what your role and responsibility is as a coach. Of course, as coaches, and I think anybody that's coached for any period of time, we all know this feeling. We've all had those clients who are just the ideal client. They follow the program, they eat well, they sleep well, they turn up to every session, they do everything you ask. Coaching them is easy. Their weekly check-ins are like, hey coach, everything went well this week, nothing to report. No news is good news. And so, coaching those clients are easy. But I think there is a sentiment of entitlement among coaches that if a client isn't doing those things, then they're not worthy of your time and effort as a coach. When in reality, I think it's the opposite. I think I've even spoken about this on a previous episode of this podcast in the past. Your role as a coach is to help those people that aren't making good decisions for themselves make better decisions, which will ultimately lead to better outcomes. And this isn't necessarily fun or sexy. This isn't turning someone into a professional athlete. This isn't necessarily a massive transformation. But for that individual who is not making the decisions that are aligned with their own goals, it can have a huge impact on them to help them and to support them. Boris Shaiko is a famous Russian powerlifting coach. You might know that name. And he's been known to say that he's mostly against RPE training for advanced athletes because it's difficult for an athlete to make good decisions for themselves in the moment. And that ideally a coach is there with you to make those decisions. And while I would agree that ideally a client would outsource some of that decision making for someone else, 99% of the decisions that they will ultimately have to make will be made by themselves. Whether it's directly training related, like what loads to use or when to push harder or when to pull back or when to make adjustments to the training plan. Whether it's deciding to turn up to the gym when you're tired or sick or stressed or short on time. Whether it's skipping an exercise or if you should even finish the volume for the day. Maybe it's nutritional decisions, which are basically happening all the time. I mean, there are just so many decisions and so many behaviors that we engage in every single day that outsourcing all of those decisions to a coach is like basically impossible. And so I think as a coach, we need to acknowledge, and even as a trainee, as a client, we need to acknowledge that like 99% of the decisions that are going to affect our results are made by the client on their own, or the individual or the athlete on their own without support. And because they're making those decisions on the fly, we need to equip them with the skills and the knowledge and the ability to make decisions that are conducive to those goals. Now, some decisions are bigger than others. Some decisions are like negligible in their effect on you, obviously. But it's the accumulation of all these micro decisions that you're making every day, week on week, year on year, that are going to, ultimately lead to your long-term progress and result. So the question is, how do we help people make good decisions? How do we help clients make better decisions so that they're able to get those better outcomes? Well, there's a famous line, knowledge is power. And I don't necessarily fully agree or like that line, knowledge is power, because knowledge is the first step for sure. And I'm going to get into that in a second. But saying that knowledge is power totally ignores the fact or forgets the fact that knowledge isn't all that's necessary to make good decisions or to implement good decisions. So I'll give you an example. Let's say someone needs to lose weight or wants to lose weight, for example, and they find themselves having a whole box of pizza on a Saturday night, or having 8 beers with their friends on the weekend, for example. I don't think anybody with more than 2 brain cells doesn't understand that that is not good management of their nutrition. Obviously in isolation. I'm not looking at a zoomed out diet, meal plan, blah, 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 blah. But in isolation, right? I don't think anybody's having a whole carton of ice cream to themselves on the weekend thinking that that's a good decision for their goals, right? It's not a lack of knowledge. They know that a box of pizza is not the right thing to be eating. They know that 8 beers is not the right thing to be engaging in. So it's not a lack of knowledge that's driving that behavior. So if it's not a lack of knowledge, what is it? What actually is leading to this behavior or to these decisions that's getting in the way of this person achieving their goal of losing weight? And this is where the knowledge is power line kind of breaks down, because yes, knowledge is the first step. If you don't know that, if you literally do not know that food has calories and calories equals weight gain and loss, then of course they need to know that as a starting point. But I think to say that knowledge is power kind of, like I said earlier, forgets the fact that there's a lot of things that influence our decision making and our behavior. So for example, let's say someone finds themselves somewhat sick 2 weeks out from a competition, powerlifting competition, and they've still got their heavier sessions to come. Well, what do? Should they push through? Should they move the days around? Should they skip a couple of days, rest for a few days, and try to do the heavy days, postpone the heavy sessions? Should they just do the heavy sessions but reduce the load? There's so many different options. There's so many ways to kind of handle that situation. And if you don't know what to do, then making a good decision is hard. So clearly some knowledge is important. And that's where having a coach is really helpful, because you can outsource that decision making. But like the example I mentioned earlier, ideally a coach is there with you to help make those good decisions, at least in training. But in a modern world, with so much online coaching happening and the popularity of online coaching, this is becoming less and less common to have your coach there with you. And so it becomes increasingly important that we equip our clients with the skills and knowledge to make better decisions for themselves. This has been an absolute pillar of my online practice this year. It feels like almost every week I'm having discussions with clients about the decisions they've made during the week and how we can fine-tune those pathways and the decision-making process to get better outcomes in the weeks and months to come. Now, another common hurdle to making good decisions, on top of the lack of knowledge that I've discussed, is ego, especially in the gym, wanting to put weight on the bar that is not deserved or aren't appropriate. Any serious trainee, anybody that's trained for any period of time will know what that feels like. You're feeling good, you want to lift something heavy, and you convince yourself that adding another 5 kilos or 10 kilos is somehow going to move you forward. But being stubborn and adding weight because you want to doesn't actually help move the needle forward. And so in my online coaching practice, reviewing these decisions week to week and having those discussions, I should say, is important. If I've got a client that's chronically overshooting, adding weight where they shouldn't be, I need to kind of stop that and jump in and say like, hey, why are you doing that? Is it because you don't know? Is it because you literally do not know? And that's the first step. It's always knowledge. You always start from a place of ignorance. You assume ignorance. Is it because you don't realize that the overshooting is an issue? Do you actually don't know that? Or is it because you do know it's an issue and you don't want to be overshooting, but you find yourself overshooting because of, like I said earlier, ego or some other psychological kind of perspective that I'm missing here? If I was coaching them in the gym, I'm physically there, so I would just take the weight off the bar myself, or I would help them make those decisions on the fly. I often find myself doing that in the gym actually. But if they're between check-ins, they're an online client training by themselves, if they're chronically making these bad decisions, then getting to the root of that decision-making process that's leading to them to these decisions that are like impeding their own progress is really, really important. Let's say a client is missing training, skipping exercises, or engaging in some other kind of self-sabotaging behavior, or maybe not sabotage is a strong word, but maybe they're just not doing the things that they know they need to be doing. Some coaches would dismiss that and be like, well, if they're missing sessions, well, I can't make them do it for them, and that's up to them. And if they don't want it bad enough, then what am I supposed to do? Which, like I said, is kind of a ridiculous take, because clearly the client wants the improvement, right? They wouldn't be engaging in coaching if they weren't serious. I think by definition, a paying trainee is far more motivated than, the average gym goer, just definitionally, because they're motivated enough to pay. And so if they're missing sessions, skipping exercises, skipping sets, that's where a discussion needs to be had as to like, okay, why are you doing that? Why is that behavior occurring? And how can I support you to make better decisions? If you're running out of time, then that's a practical thing that we need to figure out. If like you're literally just running out of time, or if you are fatigued and you're like, I don't want to do that set because I'm scared I'm going to get injured, or because I might be overtraining, or whatever it is. It's like those are decisions that need to be had. Or if you're cutting sets early, I've recently had a discussion with a client who I felt was like terribly undershooting, cutting sets early, reducing loads unnecessarily because they felt like things are too hard. And so between me and this person, we had to have the discussion of like, no, actually, from the outside looking in, like from my perspective, you're undershooting, you're not training hard enough. And so I want you to push yourself and actually like just trust the prescriptions that I'm giving for a little while and see how we go with that. And so in this context, it's like in that exact scenario, I'm basically like taking over the decision making and like pre-deciding for them and saying like, no, just do it as is, and we can decide later how on that decision. I think there's also a bit of a culture amongst online coaching to like baby clients and to like try to make every decision for them. One of my biggest pet peeves is when an athlete is like texting their coach during training sessions asking, hey, what load should I go to next, coach? Or hey, can I get the thumbs up to load up and do this and do that? I personally really don't like that, both from a coaching practice point of view, but also just from the client point of view, because the client should have some autonomy. They should be able to make their own decisions. And I think, at least in my practice, my role as a coach is to then review the decisions later. Like if a client wants to send it and they go far above the program or whatever it is, sure, like whatever, do whatever you want. Like it's your training. But then when it comes to our check-in time next week, we're going to sit down and review, well, why did you do that? Was it a good decision at the time? Is it justifiable? Is it aligned with your goals, your values, your thing, your ideas of what you want to get out of your training, blah, blah, blah. And then if it is, then cool, you made great decisions. I'm stoked for you. If it's not, then, okay, well, how did we get to this point in the first place? And so, whereas, a lot of other coaches are so afraid of their clients making bad decisions that they micromanage, is the word I was missing earlier. They micromanage their clients to such an extent that they're having their clients send them, like text them and message them during sessions. So the coach is able to oversee the whole training session and experience to make sure things are done like in an optimal way, rather than just allowing some looseness and some mistakes to happen, which is my approach. Allow the mistakes to happen and review and improve. If a client is continuously making bad decisions, then it is actually and entirely the coach's responsibility to jump in and have that discussion with them. But taking away the decision making from the client isn't helpful, at least not in the long term. I mean, there are instances, like I said in my example earlier of my online client who was chronically undershooting, where I just jump in. I'm like, I'm just going to make the decision for us. This is what we're doing. But as a coach, we do have to allow our clients to make those decisions because they are making the majority of them anyway, and just equipping them with the skills so that they're better able to make decisions in the future. Now, I know I said earlier that I don't particularly like the knowledge is power thing, but I will admit that assuming ignorance is generally the best place to start when a client is making poor decisions. As I said earlier, so do you realize the impact it will have in your training when you consistently skip this exercise. You understand the principle behind this program feature. If they don't understand, then that's actually really easy, because the first step is just education. Let's educate. But if they do understand, then that's where the digging has to happen. That's where coaching actually gets a little bit more interesting. Well, if you know this isn't a good decision, then why do you think you've done it? That's where the actual soft skills of a coach really, come out, and good coaches separate themselves from more modest coaches. We're talking now about behavior. We're talking about motivation, habits, priorities, confidence, fatigue management, expectations, psychology, stress, even a person's identity. Because it's rare, like in reality, it's rare that people are making decisions in isolation. It's not like this one decision. Although there are lots of micro decisions, it's like these decisions come from a place of, like I said before, if it's ego, it's coming from a place of insecurity, or, if someone's eating in a way that's not aligned with their goals, is it because of some, other factor? There's just so many factors that are involved in every decision that we're making. And so when someone is knowingly, like I said before, the first step is assuming ignorance, but assuming they're not ignorant. If someone is knowingly doing things that are not helpful to their own training, then we need to dig a little deeper to understand why that's going on. Now, we're not psychologists, right? We're not expected to find out about childhood trauma and tie that to their eating habits. But if we want to be results-based practitioners who want actual results for people, then it is very much our responsibility to do that little bit of digging and say, like, okay, well, why is this happening? Sometimes it's a trade-off, right? Like sometimes, for example, someone is making a decision that they know is not right for their training goals, but they have other goals outside of training for which the decision actually happens to be beneficial for. So, for example, let's say someone is going through a tough time socially. Maybe they've been a little bit isolatory, been super hyperfixated on work or some other project, or I don't know. They just haven't been doing well socially, right? Like they are going through a tough time. And a friend invites them out for a social night out. And part of that social night out is staying out a little bit later than normal and maybe having a couple of drinks. And as a result, the next day their training is kind of affected, their recovery is affected, all that kind of stuff. Now, as a coach, I'm not going to come out and say like, well, you shouldn't have done that because you should know that that's bad for your training. The discussion there is more like, okay, cool. Like if you've made those decisions, like in an informed way, and you felt like the trade-off was worthwhile. Hey, you got to hang out with a friend you haven't seen in a while, and I know you've been really like feeling disconnected from your local community and stuff. So if this actually is a net positive for you, then I fully support that, because you're a human being that's like all encompassing, and like training is just one part of your life. But if these decisions that you're making are counterintuitive to your training goals, and probably and if they are lacking in like trade-off or lacking in like a broader benefit, then that's where we as a group, like you as a client and me as a coach, have to sit down and be like, okay, cool, like, how do we help you make better decisions in the future? Like that example I gave earlier of the person who was like socially lacking at that time. Sometimes the decisions we make are like, no, I'm happy with that decision. I know that it's going to affect my training, but so be it. Or someone goes for a run with a friend because their friend wanted a running partner on a Sunday, and again, it affects their squats on the Monday. It's like, okay, you knew that was going to fuck up your legs? Yeah, I knew. Okay, well, if you knew, then sure. Like, I'm happy for you to go do that as long as you are aware of the consequences. But if someone is chronically making self-sabotaging decisions, that's where the coach really has to step into their own and help this person make better decisions. Why did you make that decision, and what can we change next time so that you're more likely to make better ones? I think that's important. It's not like to make the right decision all the time. I don't want this to make it feel like every decision has to be perfect. Every, fork in the road has to be the right one. But like I said, there are hundreds of decisions that you're making every day in small ways. Some have bigger impacts than others. But if on the average, like if chronically you're making better decisions or decisions that push you slightly closer to your goals than the other options, helping people do that is like such an important and fundamental role of a coach, which is, I guess, like the whole premise of this entire episode, right? it doesn't mean that a coach has to make the decisions for the clients. Our role, and I guess what I'm my contention for this entire episode is that like helping a client make those decisions for themselves is an important part of the coaching process. If I've got a client for over 2 years and they still need me to tell them exactly what to do every single time something unexpected happens or a hurdle pops up, then I haven't really taught them how to navigate their own training. I've just made them dependent on me. Good coaching should gradually increase someone's autonomy and ability to make good decisions for themselves. Now, of course, early on, I might need to tell them exactly what I think they should be doing when, macro decisions need to be made. But over time, I want them to understand why they're doing those things and how they can better understand their own psychology, their own behavior, their own decision-making process. So they're able to recognize in themselves what they need and make those decisions for themselves. Like I said, a lot of training and a lot of nutrition and a lot of just general physical performance. I don't want to say a lot of it's common sense because it's not. Like there are some things that you genuinely need to outsource the knowledge to, but any good coach will tell you that it's like, man, so much of the result is up to the client that I can't control everything for them. And so you've kind of got two ways to go about it. Like I said at the start of this episode, there is the approach of like, well, it's up to the client. If they want to do it, then they can do it. They can make those decisions for themselves. They're a grown adult. But I just really don't think that's an appropriate and professional way to go about doing things. I think that's professionally incompetent. And instead, I'm very much on the side of like, okay, well, we need to help those people be adults. Like if they're an adult, they're able to make those decisions for themselves. Yeah, but like, it's hard, man. It's hard doing all these things. It's hard doing the right thing all the time. And supporting people through the process is what good coaching is. A coach isn't going to be there forever. I'm not going to be standing next to you every time you walk into the gym or whenever you're going out for dinner or all these, micro decisions that are happening every day. But those decisions are going to affect your results, are going to affect our results. And so I want you to feel like that you've got the control, that you've got the capacity to make decisions for yourself that are conducive to what you want to be doing. The trade-off is there where you've got like basically like, it's almost like informed consent, although that's not the right language I'm looking for. That you've got you're making an informed decision effectively each time you're moving through, like whenever you're moving through the world, and that the results that you're getting are aligned with your expectations because you're behaving in a way that's aligned and true to what you want. Okay, thank you very much for joining me on this episode of Practical Powerlifting. It has been a little while since I've recorded one of these, so I appreciate you sticking around to the end. If you've enjoyed it, please share this with someone you know, and I'll talk to you next time.